From the Rogue Word Studio in Dallas, Texas, it's The Lit Show with Jeremy Fee. New episode each Tuesday. Authors welcome, comments encouraged. Hello everyone, welcome to The Lit Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Fee. As always, I've got something special for you today. It's my reading wrap-up book battle for February 2022, as well as a TBR, perhaps pile of possibilities, for March Mystery Madness, and I love me some March Mystery Madness, so I'm excited to do both halves of the video. In the month of February, I read way too much, but what an awesome reading month that I had. So let's look at the books that are in the book battle this month. You can decide which books you're rooting for, which books you're not rooting for. I'd love it if you put comments down below, your thoughts and opinions, what you think should win if you've read these books, or just looking at the covers or hearing about them. We're doing these books in the order that I read them. We've got 16 books in the book battle. First up is Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. This, a lot of people feel, is one of Agatha Christie's best books. It just came out in the theaters as a film with Kenneth Branagh directing and starring as Hercule Poirot. It's his second movie as Hercule Poirot after Murder on the Orient Express. I have not seen the movie, but I want to. I wanted to read the book and then see the movie. Still haven't been out to the theater. But eventually, maybe it'll come available for streaming. Who knows? And then Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. It is the second book by T.J. Klune that I read. This book has that kind of Pixar feel, just like the first T.J. Klune book that I read did. Interesting characters, creative, probably written for an audience much younger than me, though. I feel like it's written to be read by middle schoolers, high schoolers. Billy Summers by Stephen King. It's my third read this month. I was so happy that I found this book at the library. It was one of those that I didn't want to buy, but I wanted to read. I had no idea how good that it would be. I really enjoyed reading it. Story of an assassin. The book is 500 pages long, but right at like page 249, 250, the book shifts. So it's almost like you get two different halves of a complete story. It works very well though. I really enjoyed it. And then I was also trying to finish the Wheel of Time series this month, and I'm so proud to tell you, not only did I finish my Shakespearean Play challenge, but I also finished the Wheel of Time. So the fourth book this month will be The Wheel of Time Book 10, Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan. Finally, moving past the slog into some more action in the Wheel of Time. Followed up by the fifth book this month, Knife of Dreams, Wheel of Time Book 11 by Robert Jordan. Again, more great action, intrigue with the characters. Then I had an author request book, The Last Roman, Book 2, Abyss by B.K. Greenwood. I was so happy the author sent me a signed copy of this book. It was nice to get that. I really enjoyed this story. It is a series that has an immortal man who's now lived over 2,000 years. He's got a frenemy who's causing all kinds of problems. It's an interesting action-adventure story. After The Last Roman Book 2, I then was able to get through the Wheel of Time Book 12, The Gathering Storm. This is where Brandon Sanderson picked up because Robert Jordan passed away before he finished the series. He actually had planned it so that there was just one more book left, and his wife hired Brandon Sanderson to finish out the series. And Brandon Sanderson, in true Robert Jordan fashion, said, "Why finish in one book when we can draw this out over 3 books?" That's my little joke. He didn't really say that. The Wheel of Time Book 12, 13, and 14, which I went ahead and did back to back here. The Gathering Storm and Towers of Twilight will finish out the second bracket, and then the next bracket begins with the last book of the Wheel of Time, A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan, Brandon Sanderson. I did enjoy the series ultimately. Follow that up with my Shakespearean plays. Remember, I have had a goal to finish studying all of Shakespeare's plays, and to help me with that, I purchased the British Broadcasting Company's complete Shakespeare collection, in which they had put on all what they listed as 37 of Shakespeare's major plays. What I used to think were all of Shakespeare's plays, but in looking over the Folger collection, I discovered there was another play by Shakespeare, which actually was published, and you can find copies of, and so I made an effort to study that play as well. I wasn't able to watch it from the DVDs like I did the other plays, but I found an online performance of it. There's a company out there on YouTube doing streaming Shakespeare, and it's hilarious, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's hilarious in a fun way. If you have extra time and you love Shakespeare, I recommend streaming Shakespeare. Before we get to the book battle, we need to deal with the fact that I really don't have enough room in my tournament with the brackets. Yes, even with 16 spots in the bracket competition, I don't have room for all the Shakespeare plays this month. So I'm going to go ahead and battle the Shakespeare plays. There are 10 plays by Shakespeare this month, and I'm only giving them 5 spots. So we're going to have to go ahead and pair them up and battle them for the Shakespeare plays. We've got Henry VIII up against the life and death of King John. Both of these are historical plays. In these battles, it comes down to the question, which one did I enjoy more? I thought that Henry VIII was a better play because the main female role was certainly a lot more interesting than what I got out of the life and death of King John. You'll notice these are also, I believe, in alphabetical order because I just went alphabetical order for the plays I had left. So Henry VIII would be the winner out of the two of them. And then I'm pairing up Love's Labour's Lost with Measure for Measure. Love's Labour Lost had some clever dialogue in it, which I thought was interesting, but I actually enjoyed Measure for Measure more. The idea that ultimately what people put out into the world is going to come back to them, that sort of karma concept, the idea that people should be judged by what they say and do. So I did like ultimately the moral lesson, ethical, political part of Measure for Measure, though I did take issue with something in the end of the play. But overall, I did think it was better than Love's Labour Lost. The next two plays for consideration are The Merry Wives of Windsor and Pericles, the Prince of Tyre. These are both interesting plays. The Merry Wives of Windsor has Falstaff, which is a character that I'd seen in the historical plays several times. And Falstaff is an interesting character, but he's not really being a good man in this play. The Merry Wives of Windsor is kind of like a rom-com where the women get to play tricks on this man. And I didn't think the play would end up being something that I liked that much until we got toward the end. I did enjoy the way that everything came together at the end of the play. Gonna go ahead and say I enjoyed it more than Pericles, though Pericles is a fascinating story if you like old heroic tales and adventurer stories and that sort of thing. Then I would still recommend Pericles to you, though The Merry Wives of Windsor is getting the win out of these two. Then we come upon Timon of Athens up against Troilus and Cressida. Again, we're looking at plays that visit old stories, kind of heroic, almost seem somewhat fantasy-esque. There's some mythology in there with Troilus and Cressida. I'm going to give that play ultimately the win out of these two. It had a grand scope to it. And ultimately, Troilus and Cressida is getting the win out of this pair because when you look at it as a satire, it makes a lot more sense. If you tried to study the play seriously and took it at face value and not being a satire, then it would be awful. It would be a 1 or 2 star play, I would think. But as a satire, it accomplishes a great deal. That is also an issue coming up with the next pairing, the Two Gentlemen of Verona up against the Two Noble Kinsmen. The Two Gentlemen of Verona has two best friends who fall in love with the same woman. She's only in love with one of them. It's a weird story, but if you like heroic fantasy stories, stories with almost cosmic coincidence in them, then you might enjoy the story. I think there's a lot of satire in it. And then the Two Noble Kinsmen has to be taken as satire. Otherwise, it just wouldn't make sense to me. Again, this is a story with two men. This time they are cousins. They fall in love with the same woman. They just fall in love with her as love at first sight, which, is more of a lust situation you would think in most cases, but for some reason, the particular woman that they fall in love with does actually decide that she likes them. Though it's a very complicated play as the plot unfolds. Out of the two of them, I enjoyed the Two Gentlemen of Verona a little bit more, though there is something horrifying in it. So that helps me to pare down, since I had too many plays, too much to fit. Believe it or not, I wasn't done for the month. I went ahead and listened to the audiobook for Alien Covenant, the novelization of the film by Alan Dean Foster. I had been reading a collection of horror short stories. It was an author request sent to me by Jay Flynn. It's The Hand That Pulls You Under, Tales of Absurdity and Lunacy. These stories are weird, they're bizarre, they are horrific. I think a lot of you who enjoy horror short stories would really enjoy reading this collection. Now that we know what the books are, let's have them battle. In the first bracket, Death on the Nile is up against Under the Whispering Door. Agatha Christie against TJ Klune. My issue with Under the Whispering Door, which was a fun story, was just that it felt like it had been done before. It felt a lot like the book I'd previously read by him. Death on the Nile easily gets the win against it. Something that I really liked about Death on the Nile is that I was able to easily predict who the real murderer was. And I like that. I really enjoy reading a good mystery in which I know who the murderer is. Though, I hope I wasn't able to figure it out just because it reminded me of an episode of Columbo, which may have been borrowing elements of it. And since I'd seen that episode of Columbo, maybe that made it more obvious to me. I don't know. But Agatha Christie's brilliant. This book deserves the win here. Then we've got Billy Summers by Stephen King up against Book 10 of The Wheel of Time, Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan. I think Billy Summers easily gets the win here, even though I know a lot of people love Book 10 of The Wheel of Time because it finally really picks up the action and starts building toward the ultimate conclusion. But Billy Summers was amazing. I really enjoyed that story. Alright, our next pairing, the next bracket, Wheel of Time Book 11, Knife of Dreams, up against The Last Roman Book to Abyss. As much as I did enjoy the way that the Wheel of Time was finally coming to an ending, you could feel the culmination, the characters were saying they knew the final battle was coming and all of that. I feel like the book suffered a little bit in the sense of trying to set up that ultimate ending for the series. That would be my criticism of Wheel of Time Book 11. I really enjoyed Abyss, the second book in the Last Roman series. Great action sequences, a lot of fun. It did a good job of pushing that story, that series to new heights as book 2 in the series, and left you with a bit of a cliffhanger when the third book is about to come out. The Last Roman Book to Abyss, picking up that win. Then we've got two Wheel of Time books back to back against each other. Books 12 and 13, The Gathering Storm against Towers of Midnight. I'm going to say the same thing that I kind of just said about Book 11. Even though Brandon Sanderson took over the writing, and I felt like it was a great job of bringing the series toward the end, I wanted the series to end on Book 12 in the sense that I felt like it could have been wrapped up in one book. But Brandon Sanderson took his time. Out of these two books, I'd go ahead and say the book 13 was a little bit better. I'm going to pick it as the winner between them. And then we get to our third bracket, the conclusion, the epic conclusion to the Wheel of Time. It's book 14, A Memory of Light, up against Henry VIII by William Shakespeare. Both of these books are great. I'm going to give the win to A Memory of Light, even though I really don't like the title. It was an epic conclusion to the series. Basically, the last book, after some things are established at the beginning, it's almost all the final battles and fights and skirmishes that bring this all to a close, putting up with all the books getting to this point. Henry VIII is a good play, though. It's just obviously not as epic as the epic fantasy conclusion of The Wheel of Time. Unfortunately, Henry VIII is not going to win. And then that puts us here to the next set. It's Measure for Measure up against The Merry Wives of Windsor. Measure for Measure has a little bit of an issue in the conclusion, but other than that, I found it to be a fascinating story. Kind of like Undercover Boss in a weird sort of way. Perhaps some moments that seemed a little unrealistic. The Merry Wives of Windsor was funny. It was funny in a lot of ways. And it had that very weird ending that was fun. A fun, weird ending. Sorry, my cat is just sitting next to the microphone licking himself. I hope you can't hear it. Anyway, out of these two, I'm picking Measure for Measure as the winner because I enjoyed the overall story more. You can only see people play tricks on someone so many times in a comedy before it gets a little old. Alright, our next bracket, next pairing, we've got got Troilus and Cressida up against the two gentlemen of Verona. In my mind, this isn't even much of a competition. I think that Troilus and Cressida is clearly the better play, more mythic levels to it. To me, clearly the better satire, the more obvious of the two. The two gentlemen of Verona, I think, is supposed to come across as a rom-com at first, only for you to then realize that it's got to be a satire later on. So to me, Troilus and Cressida does a better job delivering a clear message across to the audience. And our last pairing here in prelims, we've got the novelization of Alien Covenant up against The Hand That Pulls You Under, Tales of Absurdity and Lunacy. Both of these stories deal with horror. Really, The Hand That Pulls You Under is short stories that are horror, different types of them. Some of them are sci-fi horror, and then with the Alien series, it's often sci-fi horror with some sort of weird, bizarre alien thing that is killing people off one at a time, which can be a lot of fun to watch as a movie. I did enjoy the novelization. Alan Dean Foster does a nice job. Having seen the movie before reading the book, I'm a little surprised to say I actually enjoyed the book more. It was nice to get more of the characters' thoughts as the story continued, which you don't necessarily get in the film. But out of these two, I'm going with the horror short stories, The Hand That Pulls You Under. Some of these stories were so creative. I felt like some of them were very original, and I have to admit, I even had some dreams or nightmares that I feel were inspired by reading this book. You know, I'd read just a story or two at a time and then put it down and go to other things and come back to it. So I did have it on my mind for quite a while in the month. Alright, we've got our prelims taken care of. We now need to do the quarterfinals. So going back up to the top, we've got Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie up against Billy Summers by Stephen King. And this is where I feel like both of these books could be in finals for the month. Both of them were wonderful reads. I highly recommend them both. If you like murder mysteries, Death on the Nile, probably a book for you. If you enjoy crime stories, especially assassins, former military sniper characters, then Billy Summers could very much be a good read for you. Having to pick between the two of them is gonna be tough. In fact, if this was finals, I might try and just say I'm gonna have a tie, let them both win, but I can't do that in quarterfinals. So picking between the two of them, I'm gonna go with Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. It's a tough choice. Like I said, it's close because I really enjoyed both reads, but I think I had a little bit more fun. Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. The next section for quarterfinals, we've got The Last Roman, Book 2 Abyss, up against Towers of Midnight, that 13th book in the Wheel of Time. I'm going to give the same logic I gave earlier. The Last Roman, Book 2 is going to beat out the Wheel of Time, Book 13 here. Same sort of reasoning. Brandon Sanderson in trying to finish up the series. Book 13 is good, but a lot of it is set up to give us the final book, the final battles. I enjoyed The Last Roman more. I feel like it accomplishes a lot with the action and the story that takes place in it. B.K. Greenwood set it up so that each book in the series has something that the main character is trying to achieve that is dealt with in that book, and then you move on to the next book. Even though it's a continuing story, you do have something that definitely feels like it is finished in each book. Alright, let's move on to the next pairing. We've got the final book in the Wheel of Time, A Memory of Light, up against Measure for Measure by William Shakespeare. Measure for Measure is not a perfect play. I think it is interesting. I like the ethical consideration in it. But without giving you spoilers, there is something that happens at the end that greatly disturbed me. That in Shakespeare's time, I'm sure the audience was okay with, but a postmodern audience today, watching or reading this play, I think would be greatly disturbed by what I felt was something very sexist that happened at the end of the play that was played off as a happy ending. Though it's possible that Shakespeare meant that as satire. I don't really know. The win here to the Wheel of Time, the epic conclusion, book 14, A Memory of Light. Even if I don't like the title of that book, it's going to get to advance to semifinals. Then our next pairing for quarterfinals, we've got Troilus and Cressida up against The Hand That Pulls You Under. Troilus and Cressida, what a story. I mean, if you are not familiar with the story, it takes characters that you know from mythology, characters like Achilles, and they're a part of the story, but they are not portrayed the way that what you are used to, because I believe it is a satire. It's not a perfect story. I feel like some people probably wouldn't appreciate some of the satirical elements in the play. And then when it comes to the collection of horror short stories that I read, The Hand That Pulls You Under, you've got a situation where you've got a lot of really original, creative, interesting stories, though again, maybe not everyone would appreciate every one of them. A couple of the stories had some really extreme sexual stuff going on, and at first I was like, why is this here? But I realized it served a purpose for the story. It was not just gratuitous sex for the sake of having sex in a story. It actually fulfilled a message. The last story in the collection has a lot of that going on, but it actually, I felt, came together in a culmination that was commentary on our society today, how internet culture works and all of that. So I think that was very well done, and I think it's really neat to have these two works paired against each other, because both of them, I think, are social commentary. Both of them are screaming at the audiences to, yes, be entertained and enjoy all this, the horrificness of it, but at the same time, to think about themselves and think about society and what's going on. Ultimately, in this case, I'm going to give the win to the horror short story collection, The Hand That Pulls You Under. Though I do recommend Troilus and Cressida for fans of mythology to get those characters with a different type of portrayal than what you're used to. Alright, now we've got that great moment where I always like to say, it's the final four. I love the final four, looking at what they are each month. This month, our final four comes down to Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, The Last Roman Book to Abyss by B.K. Greenwood, the final book in the Wheel of Time series, A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, and the horror short story collection The Hand That Pulls You Under, Tales of Absurdity and Lunacy by Jay Flynn. Wonderful reads. It completely depends on your reading taste whether you're going to like these. All of these books have qualities that if you are a fan of that subgenre that they are a part of, I think you would love them. But if you're not, they're probably not a read for you. You know, Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, a lot of people cannot stand Hercule Poirot, especially not in large doses. Some people like the short stories more than the novels, what have you. But I do like the character, and I accept that he is an arrogant character in the way that he deals with the mysteries, so I enjoyed it. The Last Roman Book to Abyss, if you like cinematic, fast-paced action stories with investigations and religious elements similar to the Dan Brown mysteries, then you would like it. But if you're not into that, you're not going to enjoy it. The Wheel of Time, epic fantasy, told over 14 books with hundreds, perhaps thousands of characters involved. If you're not into that, then it would be a waste of your time to go through 14 books to get to that conclusion. But if you like that kind of stuff, wow, it's amazing. It is really amazing. And then The Hand That Pulls You Under, Tales of Absurdity and Lunacy. If you like weird horror stories that are going to make you think, that might have really bizarre stuff in them, then this is a book you're going to like. But if that stuff is something you can't stomach, then don't read it. I would say stay away from it. So all four of these books at least have that in common, that within the type of stories they are, I think you're going to either love them or hate them. So saying that, let's go to the first pairing, Death on the Nile up against Abyss. I'll just go ahead and say the rest of this, they're all going to be tough decisions. For these, I like to say it's the book that I enjoyed reading the most, and even though I enjoyed both of these, I'm going to go with Death on the Nile. I get the strange satisfaction out of accurately predicting a murder mystery. Though, Agatha Christie throws in an extra twist, but like a last second extra twist at the end beyond just the murder mystery, which did make it, to me, all the more intriguing, because I got the murderer right, but I didn't know there was a little something extra coming. So for that extra little something, I'm giving the win in this pair to Agatha Christie. Death on the Nile is going to finals. For the other pairing, we've got A Memory of Light up against The Hand That Pulls You Under. My apologies to Jay Flynn. It was a really fun collection of horror short stories to read, but I'm giving the win to The Wheel of Time on this one. The epic conclusion to that series. Going to finals. Looking at the finals, we've got Death on the Nile, and we've got the epic conclusion of The Wheel of Time. You know, Brandon Sanderson in his interviews said this is not his book. This is Robert Jordan's book. Even though he took Robert Jordan's notes and spread it out over 3 books instead of 1, I think he probably did that realistically because the amount of story that was left to be told to get it all all done accurately. To actually give each character a feeling of conclusion between these two, it is difficult. But I'm going to give the win to the epic fantasy The Wheel of Time, Book 14, A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. I mean, how often do you see a 14-book series? And now that we've had the winner determined, we can go ahead and put this month's winner in with last month's winner as we are building up to another epic battle at the end of the year. And it will be time to talk about March Mystery Madness and what sort of TBR or pile of possibilities that I'm putting together for my March reading. I love March Mystery Madness. There are a ton of hosts who can do a much better job explaining it to you than I can. I'm watching Janelle's videos over there, her YouTube channel, Too Fond of Books. She explained this year's theme to be 2x2 or doubles. You're allowed to interpret it however that you want. Find mysteries that have doubles in them, or twos, or maybe two characters in the title, or two-word titles, or two authors of the book. Any way that you want to play with this idea of twos or doubles or twins or pairings and that sort of thing, because it's the year 2022. I think it's a great theme and adds a little more fun. Though if you want for March Mystery Madness, you can just read mysteries. You can ignore the theme. You don't necessarily have to go with that. But I do know that Dane Cobain has written a detective series that has 2 books in it. So for March Mystery Madness, I think it would be fun to read what is so far a 2-book series. I also want to read 2 books, at least, by Agatha Christie. I'm thinking probably Poirot Investigates and The Body in the Library, because I already own them. I do own a couple other Agatha Christies that I haven't read yet, but I don't know if I'll have time to get to them. I also want to read The Island of Dr Moreau, which I believe could be classified as a sci-fi mystery. I watched a film version years ago, I remember, with Val Kilmer in it. It was a weird film, and I don't know how accurate it was to the book, plus I don't remember it very well. So I'm looking forward to reading that book. But as part of the 2x2 concept, to pair with The Island of Dr Moreau, I have access via NetGalley to an advanced reading copy as an ebook to Silvio Moreno Garcia's upcoming novel, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. So I think it'd be very exciting to read The Island of Dr. Moreau and then read The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, and I can tell you, my viewers, all about it before the book even comes out, so you can consider whether or not you want to pre-order it or read it yourself. You know, I'm a huge fan of Silvio Moreno Garcia. Every time she has a book come out now, I want it. I want to read it. I also have an author request that I need to get to. It is a science fiction book. That's more than enough to keep me busy for the month, though I still have not gotten to several things that I want to read, so we'll put these in the pile of possibilities. The Murderbot series. I want to read Murderbot. I bought it as a 4-book series when I thought there were 4 books in it, though apparently I think there are 5 or 6 books. They're novellas. They're really short, though. I still have not started, well, I haven't gotten past the character list and table of contents and maps and such. For Gardens of the Moon, I really want to get into the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. I was planning to start that in January, didn't. Planning to start it in February, didn't. And now we're going to be at March, so it would be nice to actually start that. My only thought is, I know there's a lot there to think about, and I don't want to rush it, you know? I want to finish a lot of these other series and get through it before I get to it. Which is a reminder, I still have not read the Game of Thrones series, A Song of Ice and Fire. And I think it would be good to get through A Song of Ice and Fire, potentially, before getting to Gardens of the Moon, before getting through that series. I just have a feeling that I might want to do that. And of course, there's plenty more that I want to read. So many shelves full of books. I haven't gotten to the Foundation series in science fiction, the Expanse series, so many books, so much to read. But I think that's more than plenty to mention for this month. Please put your comments down below, your thoughts on the book battle. What are you reading for March Mystery Madness? And as always, even though I have more than enough to read, I'm happy to take recommendations if there are things that you think that I should read. Alright, that's all I've got for you today. Every Tuesday is a good Tuesday for a book talk, a book battle, a TBR, what have you. Peace.